You mean on any given expedition or
Yeah, any given. I mean, do you have any strategies as you're either on an expedition or you're doing an ultra race, ultra distance race, where things that you do or think of, or maybe even sing to yourself? I don't know, that help you keep yourself focused and present when you need to be, but distance when you don't need to be.
Well, it's funny. I'd like to say I'm deep in some way that way, but I'm really not. I mean, I commit to these things. Sometimes I'm on my own. Sometimes I'm with teammates, just depends on the expedition. I'm fully in, I'm all in, I'm committed to it and I love it. And it's not lost on me that I'm very fortunate that I get to do what I love as my job, and for certain, there are, hard times or there are with any job that we take on or career or have the passions that we have in our life, there are times when it's difficult, the difficult periods, right? But for the most part, at the end of the day, I'm in some pretty extraordinary locations on the planet. And I get to see and experience things that I'm very fortunate that I get to. You know what I mean? Because of that, I don't necessarily there's hard days out there, but I've committed myself. I've chosen to be there. So because of that, I'm like, okay, this is what I'm doing. And it's hard. I mean, look, I've had injuries out there. I've been injured on expeditions where, I have to ask myself, I'm laying in my tent in the morning and I'm like, there is no way, I'm procrastinating. There is no way that I can go today. But at the end of the day, I mean, it's a simple question to ask myself, are you moving today or are you not?
Cool. We Get Outdoors Nation. I, again, are here to tell you I've got the luckiest job on planet Earth, where I get to talk to inspirational, slightly crazy, and sometimes off the charts people. And I guess today, by some people's definition, today's guest could be off the charts. Today's guest has done all sorts of cool things, but ultra distance running is the badge that seems to go across the top of it, along with expeditions and guiding and all sorts of things. And so today we're joined by a Canadian, Mr. Ray Zahab. Ray, welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Rob. It's great to be here.
Yeah, we're
great to be here. We need snow. We're waiting for snow where I live. We're waiting for the snow because we want to get out skiing. In Canada, that's what we do at this time of year. It's December, and there's no snow yet.
How are you going to cope?
Change.
Yeah, that's all the Canadians are going to be.
Well, you know what? Coping. It's not even a matter of coping. It's like a matter of surviving. We need this snow. Wow. I'm telling you, it's crazy. But anyhow, they say next week, so let's hope.
Next week. Whereabouts in Canada are you, Ray?
I live in Quebec, Canada. So where I live in a region called the Gatineau Park. It's sort of if you will, and it's owned by the National Capital Commission. So it's kind of a national capital. It's not owned by Canadians. It's managed by the National Capital Commission. It's a national park outside of the capital of Canada, which is Ottawa, for people that aren't as familiar with Canadian geography. So we're just across the river and the provincial border in the province of Quebec. Very,
very beautiful. I've spent some very fun evenings in Montreal in Quebec in my distant past. But maybe less said about that sort of fun would be better on this podcast. Ray, I wanted to kick off to this interview with something that struck me. And I guess what it is whose was the crazy idea to do 111 days in the Sahara, 70 kilometers a day, and just go, I'm going to run the Sahara? Where did that start from?
Well, that's a really good question. I started ultra running and racing in ultra marathons in 2004. As a matter of fact, the very first running race I ever did, foot race, period, was the Yukon Arctic Ultra 100-mile race. And that came after a decision just a few years before, 4 years before, to be exact, when I was turning 30, that I was tired of the unhealthy life I was smoking like a pack a day, 2 packs of smokes a day, drinking my face off and not really doing anything. It was just kind of at a point in my life where I needed a change. And so my younger brother, who was into all these sorts of things like adventure racing and ice climbing and all this jazz, convinced me that there could be like a different path, like something else that I could do. And he was just so confident and in love with the things he was doing outside that I had never been introduced to before. I mean, I just really hadn't, other than watching the Eco Challenge on TV, thought this guy's amazing and he's my brother. I'm going to try and do some of the things he does. And one thing led to another. And I basically changed my life. I became a passionate ice climber with my brother and mountain biker. But then lo and behold, I read an article one day about these ultra marathons that take place around the world. And I was so not only mesmerized, but inspired by the people that were doing these things that seemed like seemingly normal people doing the extraordinary, that I wanted to, get my foot in the pool and see what it was all about. And so I entered my first race, which was the Yukon Arctic Ultra in 2004. And ridiculously, I won it. I have no idea how I made it happen, but I was able, I was able to not only finish this crazy race, but I won this race. And it was such an empowering moment. And it wasn't like something that necessarily, and I'm not going to try and get too philosophical, but it was like, for me, it was like, wait a second, it was an epiphany. Like, people underestimate themselves physically, mentally, emotionally. Like, what the hell? How did this just all happen so quickly? Going from someone who's smoking a pack a day to someone who then gets in really good shape, changes their life 180 degrees, basically. And then I go and I do one of these ultra marathons and I win it. And I'm thinking to myself, like, wait a second, like, it's not obviously just me. It's something that each and every one of us has in us, this ability to do amazing and extraordinary things in our lives. And I wanted to know how I did it for me. And the only way that I could figure out that I was going to learn how I did it was to go and do more ultra marathons. So I started doing these races all over the world, like in deserts and jungles and all this stuff. And it was while I was competing in these ultra marathons that I met 2 friends, Kevin and Charlie. And then we started down this path of, hey, wouldn't it be great someday to run across the entire Sahara Desert? And that's kind of how it started.
I love it. Come on. Who was it, though, that came up with the idea of the Sahara? Was one of you guilty, or was there this mutual consent, or who threw it out there first?
Oh, God, you're asking me something from roughly how many years? Like, I don't want to date myself, but I am 52 years of age and it's the year 2021. So what? I can't even remember. Like, exactly. I it's one of those things where, you come up with the ideas and you toss them all about and eventually something lands, right? And you got to remember, this is at a time when the thought of doing something like this, I'm sure people were out there doing, people had always been doing extraordinary things, but it wasn't like, okay, I got this idea, I'm going to put the post on Instagram or on TikTok and here we go. Like, and then, 5 trillion people see what you're talking about, right? It just wasn't like that. So you're kind of like, these ideas percolated and stuff, right? And you eventually ended up to where you wanted to go, and you really had to want to do it because, I mean, we were fully committed to that thing, And so, 111 days, 4,500 miles, or roughly 7,500 kilometers, 6 countries, no bathing, basically. I mean, it was pretty tough.
But what's Jeepers. The reason I was probing it, about who came up with the idea is I've come up with some ideas of things that we should do in the past, and then I've dropped them in front of friends who I've done other trips with and other expeditions with, and the reaction on people's face when we should just kayak around the Great Britain because it seems like a good idea. There's been some priceless moments, but I guess that you can't remember the priceless moments. So 70 kilometers a day, 111 days, rest days?
Oh, you cut out there.
Sorry. So,
Rob, are you still there?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Rest days, was that rest days?
Yeah.
Rest days with a question mark on the end of it? No rest days.
No rest days.
No rest days.
how do you go about holding yourself together to run, like physically and mentally, to run that distance every day in that heat without a break?
Well, I think that over time, if you ask me the question in 2020, how do we do it? And in 2007, how do we do it? Because since then, I've probably done close to 20,000 kilometers of one shape or another, in some of the coldest places on the planet, sometimes and mostly in cold places, unsupported or self-contained, and then running across. I ran the length of the Namib Desert from the South African border to close to the Angolan border, about 50, 60K outside of the Angolan border in the middle of summer. Let me tell you, dude, that is a heinous desert, right?
Yeah.
And you're running sometimes 20, 30 kilometers at a time without resupply, hitting the resupplies every, and then trying to crank out 60 to 80K a day. It's difficult. But over time, what I've learned now is that I am compelled to want to do these things and explore these places and meet the people that occasionally I get to meet or come into contact with wildlife or whatever it is, to share the stories of this journey as a thread, if you will, so that the schools that are tapped in and following along with my expeditions live, because we always have a live website, they're able to learn about a region or a part of the planet with a multitude of factors on that, like branches on a tree, right? Like you start out and the trunk of the tree is the expedition, but then there's all these branches, right? And so they're learning about culture, they're learning about economics, they're learning about biodiversity, whatever, through the thread of the adventure that I'm on. So I'm sort of compelled to keep going on the current expeditions that I'm on because of that school connect. It really is a big thing for me. I've been doing this for many, many years, and I love connecting the expeditions to students and students to expeditions using technology. But in running the Sahara, when we started out, the goal was to get to the east coast of Africa. That was the goal. And we were very committed to that, the three of us. We knew each other very well. And, there was a documentary film being made about the expedition. And so we wanted to do it. We really wanted to do it. Now, as we were running across the Sahara and we began to meet people and learn about more the water crisis in North Africa, and as things, as these things happen on an adventure, what you set out to do, usually by the middle or the end, something incredible happens, right? And incredible things happen along the way that you can't predict. Don't even bother trying to predict, because it's not going to be what you predict. It was kind of that scenario. You know what I'm saying? So what kept us going every day? I have no idea. Because I was sure I wouldn't make it past halfway. I thought I'd be tapping out at halfway. Hey, lo and behold, made it the whole way, right? And then the documentary film Running the Sahara was made about the expedition, right? And it was used, Matt Damon and the people that made the film leveraged that film as a way to raise awareness and fundraising initiatives for the water crisis in North Africa.
That's incredible. And what an honor to have somebody like Matt Damon go and make a movie about you. That's even more incredible, isn't it? Wow. I love it. What do you do to hold your head together while you're doing these races? Now, I find I've done a lot of quite long distance kayak races and also quite large solo expeditions on my own, out 3 months on your own at a time. And I find that I've got a few hacks to keeping myself sane and not losing my marbles. And also to keep going as well, because my brain certainly tries to play tricks on me and tries to tell me that now would be a good time to stop at 11 o'clock in the morning and, it'll be fine. What do you do to keep your head in shape and keep you going in the right direction?
You mean on any given expedition or?
Yeah, any given. Do you have any strategies as you're either on an expedition or you're doing an ultra distance race where, things that you do or think of or maybe even sing to yourself, I don't know, that help you keep yourself focused and present when you need to be, but distance when you don't need to be?
Well, it's funny. I'd like to say I'm deep in some way that way, but I'm really not. I mean, I commit to these things. Sometimes I'm on my own. Sometimes I'm with teammates, just depends on the expedition. I'm fully in, I'm all in, I'm committed to it and I love it. And it's not lost on me that I'm very fortunate that I get to do what I love as my job, and for certain, there are, hard times or there are with any job that we take on or career or have the passions that we have in our life, there are times when it's difficult, the difficult periods, right? But for the most part, at the end of the day, I'm in some pretty extraordinary locations on the planet. And I get to see and experience things that I'm very fortunate that I get to. You know what I mean? Because of that, I don't necessarily there's hard days out there, but I've committed myself. I've chosen to be there. So because of that, I'm like, okay, this is what I'm doing. And it's hard. I mean, look, I've had injuries out there. I've been injured on expeditions where, I have to ask myself, I'm laying in my tent in the morning and I'm like, there is no way, I'm procrastinating. There is no way that I can go today. But at the end of the day, I mean, it's a simple question to ask myself, are you moving today or are you not? And anything else is extraneous information. So it's like, okay, I don't think I'm going to move today because I've got blisters and blah, blah, blah. Okay, none of that matters right now. What matters is, are you moving or not? And if you're not moving, that's totally fine. But, it comes down to very simple, finite, if that's the right term to use, decisions, right? And then that other information comes in after. So it's very simplified in my mind. While on the other hand, it's also not lost on me that this is what I get to do. So if this is what I get to do, then I'm going to give it everything I have. I'm not going to waste my time. I'm just so fortunate to be out there and lucky to be out there and doing what I love. So even on the hard days, you got to embrace it,
So it's almost like a stoic approach to persevering and resilience and keeping yourself moving. And I don't know, chunking things down to lose the noise and just gain real clarity about, as you said, yes, no decision, as opposed to all of the other factors. Like make the decision, then live with it.
Well, yeah. I mean, in essence, I don't think of it as harshly, Rob. You know what I'm saying? There's hard times on every expedition, and there's times when you run up against walls, and there's times when you have setbacks. There's times when you don't finish, right? But it's all part of the process. It's all part of. It's just another act in the play, kind of thing. You know what I mean? And it's just there's high points and low points, but at the end of the day, it's kind of like there's this middle ground, median or average, and that's the tone that you sort of hit after a while. So you kind of, with experience and over the years, I've learned to take things in stride, no pun intended, and you sort of just go with the process. So compelling myself or trying to think, like over romantically, I've got to get out there and push against the wind and all that. I don't really think of it that way. I just think of what's happening that day. What am I going to do that day? What are my goals that day? I'm running across the Namib Desert and it's 5 billion degrees out. And I don't know if there's lions in the bushes, right? I don't come from a place where there's lions. So what the hell, right? Am I going to, what's my plan? What am I going to do? How am I going to be as safe as I can? How am I going to navigate through this landscape? And you, with that plan, go forward, but it's not like you're looking at it. I don't know if I'm coming across, if you're picking up what I'm trying to say. Sometimes these things are really hard to put into words for me, but I'm looking at it from a perspective of the reality of the situation on the day. And the hurdles are just something that you take in as part of the process for this awesome thing I get to do that I call my job.
The reason why I'm pushing on it is that I did some research with our listeners before the interview about what is it that holds them back from achieving a level of capability that is kind of beyond where they currently are. So pushing themselves forwards when times are hard, so on and so forth. And this mind game of how do you keep yourself focused, how do you keep yourself going, how do you not lose the will to live, so on and so forth, interestingly, is one of the biggest things that people talk about. They all everybody accepts the fact that if you want to get fit and run, to be a runner, that there's quite a matter-of-fact process to follow. And yet it seems to be the mind games seem to be the thing that hold people back. And so I just wondered if there was any gems out there, or whether it's literally like time on the road or time in the trainers, or as it were, in the running shoes that help you develop a mindset where you can pick yourself up and, like on the Sahara, run another 70 kilometers.
Well, I mean, and you're saying, like, is there a sort of like a magic, not a magic bullet, but you know what I'm saying, like a magic solution to those hard days, like keeping yourself rocking? Is that what you're talking about? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I suppose if I was to give an example, like my last big thing I did was a 200-kilometer kayak race, and at the end of it, towards the end, that my way of keeping going was just like micro chunking down the next. Okay, I'm going to get to that point there, and then I'm going to choose another point, and then I'm going to choose another point, and like chunking the race down into really small little parts, and that helped me not lose myself in the pain that there was still another 50 Ks to
go. Yeah, I think that, and that is a great strategy. Okay, like chunking it out, and of course that's something that we naturally do, right? Anyone that does endurance stuff naturally, for the most part, will naturally chunk it out. But honestly, for people that are pursuing long, hard things, and they say, well, how do you do it? Like, what is I would love to say that there is a specific recipe, but I honestly, for me, feel that the recipe is much broader. It's like when you make something awesome that you throw it all together, the ingredients, and you didn't write it down, and you have no idea how the hell it turned out so good. You're like, I got to make this again exactly the same way, but you can't. Mm-hmm. It's similar to that, right? Because it's not a specific, okay, so I'm going to do number 1, then I'm going to do step 2, then I'm going to do step 3. I'm sure there are people that do things that way. Now, from a mechanical perspective, for sure, my training can be that way, or my gear can be that way, or whatever. But when it comes down to the elements of the expedition, those nuggets of, what are some of the strategies that you can do to make sure you get from point A to point B, and in some way, I don't want to say make it easier, but in some way make it more fluid, those are very relative to the individual that's doing the thing. It's like the hard things you do in your life. You are experiencing something very difficult, a difficult period in your life. And the way it makes you feel, truly deep down inside, only you can know. You can try and explain it to someone else, and hopefully that they'll understand a bit of it. But it's very hard to put it into words, because the other person may not experience the same situation and internalize it in the same way you do. Just like the great things that you achieve. The first thing I ever did, big physical, sort of newest thing. I had done a few things with my brother. My brother, the first time he took me ice climbing, and I've told this story many times, where I could not believe that we were going to climb this, 100-foot wall of ice, this frozen waterfall that he was, had me all roped up. He top roping me, but still I was terrified because I had these ice axes in my hand and, the crampons on my boots, and he's telling at me to take out this waterfall like Spider-Man. And I'd never done anything like this before. He's like, no, don't worry. I'll hang on the rope. Everything's all right. So I start climbing this ice, and I just could not believe how physically difficult it was to do. Right. Mm-hmm. And I remember topping out on that waterfall and looking down at him. And listen, by no means was I climbing under my own devices. I mean, he really was leaning on that rope, at the front, from the bottom on belay. And down at him, and he looked up at me and said, you did it. Like, you did it. And I instantly in that moment thought to myself, shit, this is what it feels like to climb Mount Everest. Now, obviously, I mean, to me, that was Mount Everest, right? I'm looking down at my brother. I'd never done anything like this. And I'm standing up there and I'm thinking, my God, how did I just do that?
Mm.
Right? It's relative. It's the great things that we do in our lives too. The greatest things that we achieve are relative to us as individuals. I've had people say to me, at the end, asking me about running the Sahara or the South Pole expedition or any one of these other things I've done. What was it like to cross the finish line? What did it feel like to accomplish something like that? Well, I remember the first time that I ran 6K and didn't have to take a walk break. It was a loop from where I was living at the time. And I ran from my door back to my door. And the feeling, the sense of accomplishment that I had doing that, or standing on the ice wall that day with my brother, or crossing the Sahara, they were all the same thing. It was just very relative to me at the time. So in doing these things and the strategies that are available to us to be able to do these things, it's very relative to the individual, how they're going to feel. I wish there was an ABC, but I would say the best tip or the best advice I can give to someone is, if you're well planned and you're committed going into this thing, is to be able to have, the big goal, crossing from A to Z, but reassess at B, C, D, E, F, and check in with where you are at each point. And if you need to move on those goals, instead of getting to Z, maybe you're heading to W, right? Well, get there and redefine what it is that you're doing out there and be able to still move forward, So it's a reassessing of your daily goals, but all this other stuff that you said, I mean, still counts, right? Like biting things off in smaller pieces. Don't think about the 5,000K, think about 50K at a time. Like those sorts of things, which are the obvious ways to go about stuff, right? But it's really knowing yourself. Sorry to blather on about this, but it's really knowing what your goals are personally and applying them forward the way that is natural and relative to you.
Cool. Well,
that's going to guarantee success.
That makes, and I think that's I think that's very sound advice, in as much as a lot of people are looking for a silver bullet, and actually I don't really think they exist. The silver bullets, that is. It's interesting. Something you said also just then made me laugh. You were talking about getting to the top of the ice climb and feeling that sort of achievement and euphoria, and that being the same as finishing the Sahara or any of the other adventures and expeditions that you've done. And I often wonder whether we build up the finish of something in our head to something it can never be. I interviewed a cyclist called Lael Wilcox, who she does very, very, very long distance mountain bike races. And she spoke about her first race that she did, which was the Trans Am across America. And she got to the East Coast, put her tire in the water rather. And in her mind's eye, she was expecting fanfares and trumpets and fireworks. And all she had was that same feeling inside and nobody about. And it's kind of funny, if you build it into something it can never be, it will never be it. I mean, I don't know if I'm making any sense. Is that kind of what you're driving at? You've got to keep it in check or in balance or something?
Yes, well, sort of. I mean, it's more about along the lines, I think, and maybe I sort of misinterpreted the question slightly, but more along the lines of what keeps you going, or how do you keep going? How do you keep going on the hard days, or what is the process by which you chunk it out and get from A to Z? Like how is it that you can, like, what is that nugget of experience, or if we want to call it wisdom, I don't know if I'd call it that in my case, but what is it that I've learned over all these years in being able to get expeditions, do your expedition or your adventure or whatever your goal is, and achieve it. And the single biggest thing is remaining as humble as you can within the process of going after your goal, but also appreciating that the way somebody else does something may not be the way you have to do it, that is relative to you as an individual, that you've got to come up with your own. You can take advice. You definitely can learn on things like chunk it out, right? Like that sort of stuff. But at the end of the day, it's got to come from inside you. And most times, most of those answers exist within us already. you know, beyond the mechanics, like here's the kind of stoves you should take, here's the kind of tent that works best, blah, 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 blah. Those are things that are very learned. But the psychological process of going through and being able to complete has to come from within you. You could learn strategies, but it's got to come from within you.
Which is, I guess, why I'm so curious around this little topic area, because as you said, what stove to use and how to pack your backpack, that you can YouTube that stuff and you can go find out pretty much most of the information that you need. There's not a lot out there about how to go and maybe rightly so, how to hold your head together for 120 kilometers or whatever it may well be.
I think that there is a lot of stuff. I think there is a lot of stuff available, and I think that people can research all that stuff and they can find that stuff. But I think at the end of the day, if you can read a book about it, but then have not worked out what your process is, you know what I'm saying? Like, that's what I'm trying to say, that it's a very individual process and you definitely can learn, but you've got to also own it. Right. And that inside you've got to figure out what your process is going to be, or how are you going to nuance those processes that you've learned to make them or modify what you've learned to 100% fit you, your psyche, the way you're built, the way you're hardwired, etc.
Cool. Okay. So the other bit that I'm very interested in with what you're doing is your impossible to possible, your youth expeditions. I'm a social worker and youth worker by academic training. When did you decide to set that up, and what? The purpose may well be obvious of it, but what are you looking to achieve with it?
Well, in 2007, after we finished our run across the Sahara Desert, it was incredible to me. Again, right? Pre-Instagram, pre-TikTok. I think Facebook was just starting, if I'm not mistaken. I can't even remember. And right. And we were just blown away by how many students in schools had learned about the expedition. National Geographic had built a website at the time for the expedition. And we were blown away by how many schools were like digging this and were fascinated by the expedition. And of course, the film came out and everything else. And it became an amazing set of tools to, again, use adventure in a way as an educational tool to connect those 6 countries that we ran across in schools with students in classrooms that perhaps would never have studied that region of the planet at all, right? So after the running the Sahara expedition, and it was abundantly clear to me after running the Sahara that human beings really, the only limits we have are the ones we place on ourselves. But at the end of the day, I feel that human beings have no limits. I mean, we could just collectively as a society or as a global society, we can do anything. I mean, we really can, right? And I just thought to myself, wow, this next generation, the potential is so huge, right? For the next generation, the generation after that if we provide them with the experiences and knowledge in different ways, like education is the one thing that constantly, in a shorter term, if you will, causes us not an evolution, but a betterment from one generation to the next, because we learn more, right? We have more knowledge in science. We have more knowledge in all these other areas of life. So I thought, let's start an organization called Impossible to Possible and give youth an opportunity, young people an opportunity to go on expeditions around the world that are sort of like, they're modeled after my expeditions in the sense that they're on foot in remote parts of the world. They go for a week to 10 days. They are 100% free for these kids to go and 100% free for schools to be part of. And we would connect schools with places like the Amazon jungle and teach the subject of biodiversity as a group of young people, 16 to 21 years of age, treks through the central Amazon, one indigenous community to the next, learning about biodiversity from the people that live in the Amazon, or going to Rajasthan and learning about access to healthcare issues, or going to Tunisia, learning about water and agriculture in that region of Northern Africa, or going to the Canadian Arctic and talking about climate change. So developing a program whereby which it's peer-to-peer learning. We created this experiential learning model, which we call Impossible to Possible. And we're all volunteers in the organization. And, I think we're at 15 or 16 youth expeditions now and adventures that we've completed. And we just keep trucking along.
Wow. And what are you seeing? Because that was 2007, you kind of came up with the idea, and you've been doing that now for 13, 14 years. What are you seeing as the outcomes for those original young people who are now probably getting married, having children, pushing careers, so on and so forth? Are you managing to keep track of those kids?
Oh, yeah. Many of them still work with us in different facets. I mean, for example, Val Gagne, who is a youth ambassador in the Atacama Desert with us that was youth expedition studying astronomy. I want to get the year right, maybe 2014, 2015. She's working with me as a guide with our guiding business. We have other youth ambassadors that are working as volunteers in current Impossible to Possible youth programs. There are youth ambassadors that have gone on to become ultra running champions. There's two of them that come to my mind right away. There's just, the list goes on and on. Hey, you're not going to stay in touch with everybody, right? It's hard. Life is busy. I've got two daughters. I'm hammered, with my daughters doing they both race in sprint kayak and sprint canoe. They are biathletes in the winter. So, we're in our own family, it's crazy busy. But I do my best to stay there. And interestingly, a lot of the students that have followed prior youth expeditions go on to do really neat things or touch back into us 10 years later. Oh yeah, I followed that youth expedition that you guys did in Peru, and it changed my perspective on what it is that I wanted to do with my life. And so, we have that as well, right?
Cool. Well, it's nice. I love social media is a mixed blessing, isn't it? The Facebook is your best friend when you get kids who you took on expeditions 15, 20 years ago, and you get to see what they're doing now. But equally, it can be a pain in the bottom. But I do like it for that functionality.
Yeah, right on. Yeah, it is amazing. And I always say this, I'm going to say it again. We're just so lucky. I'm very fortunate that I get to do what I love. Now, Impossible Possible, we fund it, obviously with Impossible Possible has its own corporate funding partners like sponsors. And then the sponsors that help to fund my expeditions typically are involved in funding as well the work of the Impossible Possible youth expeditions. No. So it's an interesting sort of, from the perspective of someone who's in this adventure, and I'm using parentheses things, adventure business. I'm very fortunate that the people that I've aligned myself with, companies that I've aligned myself with, are willing to support this crazy idea that we had that said, hey, we're going to do free expeditions for kids, and we're going to make it work, and it'll never cost anything. And if we have to charge them to go, then we're not going to do it anymore, And so, we're a small organization, but we deliver on what our goal is, and that's the best we can do.
That's incredible. I genuinely wish there was more things around the world where kids could be taken out into the outdoors and it not cost them anything, because there seems to be some money divides in society around those who can access the outdoors, or maybe it's a perception, but those who do access the outdoors and those who do not. So the fact that you're taking kids from, I'm assuming, any background to go somewhere remarkable and do something remarkable is incredible.
They can come from anywhere. They come from anywhere around the world. They can come from anywhere. Yes, you're absolutely right.
Awesome. I'm going to put a link to Impossible to Possible in the description below of this podcast. So if you do have kids, or you are of a teenager sort of years and you want to go check out what Ray gets up to, maybe see if you can go on one of his expeditions yourself, go check it out. But Ray, I want to dip in.
No, I'm not on the.
Sorry, go on.
I was just going to say. we have a bit of a delay there with it's my internet, not yours. I'm not on the selection committee. I would love to say that I am, but. And I know you'll add this anyhow. I'd put my website and social media links and all that. We do post when an upcoming youth expedition is happening. We do have an expedition happening in June, and we will be posting it'll be for a brief period in the winter of about 6 weeks where we'll take applications. And then there's a committee made up of former youth ambassadors, our executive director, et cetera. And they determine if we take everybody if we could, but we get flooded with applications. And then they decide who the final 5 or 6 kids will be for the youth expedition. So there you go. Anyhow, carry on. Sorry about that.
No worries. It's fine. It's fine. This is kind of linked into this, but you mentioned you've got a couple of daughters. And one of the things I always find incredible, and also I want to learn more about, because I've got a couple of, I had kids very late in life, is what is it that you do to inspire your daughters to want to get out and be adventurers without sort of forcing adventure down their throat? How do you parent them to get them to love the outdoors?
Well, you know what? We live in the outdoors. We live in a place that, cross-country skiing here is as normal as going for a hike. Mm-hmm. In the winter, it's a big sport. And so, when kids are 3, 4 years of age, where I live, they're on skis in the winter. It's just normal, right? Mm-hmm. And so Kathy, my wife, is an incredible ultra runner. She competes in all these 200-mile running races. We get out and do things in the outdoors because we love to be in the outdoors. And where we live, specifically our house, there's 3 or 4 trailheads right behind our house, all single track, all very technical, all very rocky. So from the time the girls were little, we would go out, we'd have one of those carrying, the parents out there will know what I'm talking about. You'll know what I'm talking about. One of those carrying backpacks where they can kind of stand up in the backpack. Yeah. And we'd have one in that, and the other one would be trailing along. And we would pull the little one out of the backpack and we'd let them scramble around on the rocks. And that's how hikes started. Now, fast forward at, 13 and 10 years of age, forget it, dude. Like 10, 20K, you tell me how far you want to go. They can do it. And they're such good technical runners, trail runners, but keeping up with them, especially on the downhills, is impossible. They can just go, right? And, I posted on, if anybody's on Instagram, I posted on Instagram, what do you call those things? A reel of my youngest one when she was 4, just turned 4, actually. I could have said 3. And 4 years of age and going up these rocky trails. And then the video immediately transitions to now, this past spring, when she's 10. And you cannot believe it when you see how fast they're running. And it's like, what, are you kidding me? And so in that span of time is very normalized for them. So going out and skiing when it's minus 30 or trail running when it's plus 30 in the summer on gnarly trails is totally normal to them. Getting into a K1 flat water boat that's super narrow is totally normal to them. Now, we've also celebrated their own and provided whatever ways we can, their own decisions, like when it comes to the sports they want to do. So they're very involved in sprint, flat water, kayak, and canoe. And something that Kathy and I do, it's just not what we do, right? But they love it and they compete and they're in these boats, dude. I don't know if you've ever sat in one of these boats, but they are insanely tippy. Like you can't keep them up. Like if you're sitting at the dock in one of these boats, you actually have to hang on to the dock or the boat will just flip over with you in the water. So you use your core to stabilize the boat. So, you know what I'm talking about with K1. So you see that you can watch in the Olympics. You can see it.
Full disclosure, I've coached an Olympic athlete to gold in a K1 kayak, so I know a little bit about them.
No.
Yeah.
Kidding me. Which one?
2020, 100 meters.
Incredible.
Not 2020, sorry, 2012. Sorry, 2020 is nonsense. 2012. There we are. 2012 London 2012 Olympics. Ed McIver.
I thought you meant world championships.
No, sorry.
That's incredible. You know what? When I got to tell my kids this, they're going to be blown away. They're going to absolutely love that I'm talking to you on the podcast today.
Yeah, I used to get flown around the world to coach kayaking by people who wanted to go faster and or longer in kayaks. That was my that was my gig for a number of years.
Well, I'll tell you what, we'll fly out to Chelsea, Quebec, or somebody will. We'll get you on a Concorde and get you out here as quick as we can. But you know what? So you appreciate it. I mean, it's a super difficult sport. And doing this thing, right? So it's their own thing. It's their own thing. It's not something that we do. It's what they do, right? And like if you come into our house, there's nothing on the walls or there's no records or any of this jazz hanging on the walls to indicate what it is that I do for a living or any of Kathy's awards or races or any of that. It's not like our place, we decided all that stuff gets tucked away in a filing cabinet, and instead let's celebrate what they're doing, what our daughters are doing. And that's kind of the environment that we've created in this place. So they, it's their stories, which are the ones we talk about at the dinner table, unless they ask, right? And that's just kind of, I'm not saying there's a right way and a wrong way. It's just how we're doing it. And they choose the things they want to do, and they're very motivated to do them. We don't force them into one or another. We just do the best we can to support them. And yeah, that's it, right? We both work full time like crazy so that we can afford to keep them in sports that they love to do, right? I mean, and the amount of food they eat, it's ridiculous. Because they're training so hard. It's crazy how much food they eat. Anyhow.
But I love it because there's a thing in psychology that if I was to summarize it, says you always get more of what you celebrate. And so if we just celebrate dad, then dad will go on to do more cool things, but nobody else is included. Whereas if you celebrate your kids' successes, then they'll be motivated by that, and they'll look to go and have more celebrations that they've caused, and will progress themselves for that desire to be celebrated more. I think it's a very, very nice strategy, one I want to adopt more in my family, actually.
Yeah, well, I mean, and it's just natural for us to, as we said earlier, like getting in the outdoors, it's just natural for us to go and do things as a family that are outdoors based, right? And it's just, and now that they're older and in a lot of cases faster than us, it's even more fun now, So, yeah, that's
Super
that,
cool.
right?
Super cool. I love it. Now, I don't have time really left to go and delve into your trek to the South Pole. What I will say is it's a brilliant TED Talk, and I'll put the link below for people to go check out with some links to your books as well, Ray. But I had this question written at the start of the interview, and it's this. You get an email from TED tomorrow morning saying, Ray, 3 months' time, you need to come and do another talk. It's got to be more impactful than the last one, but it can't be the last one. What would you like to go talk about?
It's an interesting thing. When I did that talk, I remember that's a long time ago also. That's like 12 years ago. Yeah. I did that talk. And I've been speaking corporately all over the world. I think I did a talk for The Economist by that point, and I was in Hong Kong for various events with our Royal Geographic. But it was different at TED, especially that, I walk out on the stage, everybody, it's ridiculous. Al Gore's in the audience, right? It's crazy, right? You're talking to all these people. So I was somewhat nervous, and I screwed a few things up in that one, but whatever. Now what I would want to talk about is the impact that I feel that education, the true impact that the outdoors and adventure, no matter where we are, can have on our young people. And that I believe that being outside has a direct impact on how on the sort of the interpretation of future generations on the health of our on the health of our climate, our environment. In other words, what I'm getting at, and you sort of alluded to it before, that the outdoors has economic barriers in some ways, that if there was ways to reduce that economic barrier to get outside and be in nature, we know this for sure. If someone's in nature, 9 times out of 10, there's always a person who's just not digging it, right? They just don't like being in the woods. Mm-hmm. But 9 times out of 10, you take someone and you put them outside and give them an experience in nature, it changes their perspective of nature and appreciation for it, right?
Yep.
And there, if I was going to do a TED Talk, I would want it to be about the fact that we need to reduce the barriers, financial and social and otherwise, to getting young people into the outdoors. That by exposing young people, especially in urban environments and other environments that are hard to reach, into the outdoors, to give them an appreciation of how amazing this planet is, that I think that will go a long way to future preservation. I really do. I think it changes people. That's what I'd want to talk about.
That's awesome. I love it. When we get outdoors, we have a saying that people look after what they love. And we don't believe that enough people get in the outdoors. So therefore, the world as a whole will suffer because people can't look after something they've forgotten how to love. And I think our views are very, very aligned on that. The more people who can get out there, learn to love the outdoors for all of its ups, downs, beauties, and everything else, the better chance we have of our kids' having a healthy planet to live on.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, exactly. You know, and that's, I mean, because at the end of the day, I mean, everything that's happening right now, right? From this is not going to be the first global pandemic. I mean, let's be honest, right? We know there's more coming down the pipe, and with all of the hurdles and challenges that face this next generation, we got to give them every tool at their disposal, you know, to tackle everything ranging from social to environmental issues. Right?
Yeah.
So
it's crazy. I don't know whether your kids have to wear a mask when they go to school, but my daughter is 5.5 and now has to wear a mask at school. And what's blown my mind in not necessarily a good way is how she's just adapted to it, which is amazing, but equally doesn't get to see facial expressions for 6 hours every day because everyone's wearing masks the entire time. And I mean, we've got to give our kids like resilience and all sorts of experience to get resilient with, because I think you're right. The world's going to be a crazy place going forwards, and we need to equip the kids to. Like, it doesn't matter whether they want to follow the outdoors as a future career or passion, or whether they want to be an economist. They've still got to go and be able to keep their head in a sane place, and be progressive and be a decent human being. I'm a little bit nervous about what's in the future for them unless we get more kids outside and more people outside, if I'm to be honest with you.
Yeah, I hear you on that. And it is a difficult time. I mean, yeah, for sure, our kids are wearing masks at school, et cetera, et cetera. It's the reality of the situation, and it is what it is. So I think that if we're doing our best at home and explaining situations, then they're going to gain a resilience that perhaps we didn't even have as young people. Mm. We lived in I don't know how old you are, I'm 52, but we lived in a completely different time, right? Like, things were not the way they are. And so, as with everything, it's a double-edged sword, right? On one end, you're gaining a resilience. On the other end, it's like you look at it, you're like, oh my God, what these kids have to go through these days. But at the same time, they're learning now what the future may be, right? So at any rate, we'll see.
We'll see. Well, so my very final question for you, because I know you've got things to get on with today, is what next for Ray? Where are we going to see you running? What expeditions? What's in the pipeline for the next little while? And I realize there's COVID that could be an obstacle, but in the ideal circumstances, what do you have in the pipeline?
Well, I've started guiding again. All of my clients are vaccinated. We're going to amazing places, and we're being optimistic about being able to travel and go to these places. I think it's the mindset. We can either sit here and think things will never get better, or we can instead hope and project that things are going to and keep moving and everything else. Because hey, dude, my life is my ability to earn an income is completely based in travel right now. So I'm hoping that we're going to keep moving. So I've got we also have a youth expedition planned, as I mentioned before, for June. I've got a really long Arctic expedition this winter, and other projects on the horizon. I'm always out there, but you know what? If people want to tune in, I know people are using mostly Instagram these days. I'm there on Instagram. I'm also on Facebook. I have sort of a public, I think they call it a public page on Facebook. That's the one I always use. So I'm in those places. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm in all the traditional social media outlets, and I do post what I'm doing and what's going on and how I'm training and preparing. So if anybody wants to tune in, they can there for sure.
Cool. And what are you up to in the Arctic? Are you running, expeditioning, trekking? What's the plan?
Yeah, it'll be a combination of trekking and skiing in a remote part of the Canadian Arctic this winter. And I'll be talking details about that very, very soon, just being sensitive around COVID and stuff. And I'll be talking about the location in the coming month or so. I'll start to talk about it, but I plan on departing at the beginning of February.
Wow, cool. Okay, now real final question, Ray. To wind this interview up, folks, you can go and check out Ray beneath all of his Instagram, website, TED Talk I mentioned, books, everything are linked below. So go and follow Ray. But Ray, what are you really capable of?
Well, I think we're capable of anything we set our minds to. Right? I mean, there's no measurement. There's no measurement that says the only measurement that the only people measuring, or the only measurement that counts really at the end of the day, is the one that you use. So, if there's something that you want to achieve in your life, you may or may not achieve it exactly as you want, but you sure as hell got to give it a try, right? Open-ended.
I love it. Ray Zahab, thank you so much for your time. Thanks for joining us on the We Get Outdoors podcast, and good luck and God bless with anything and everything that comes in your future. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Rob. It was great chatting with you.
Cheers.